Welcome to Living Out 180, real conversations about faith, leadership, and life from 180 Church. Each week, we will take Sunday's truths deeper, opening scripture, asking honest questions, and talking about how to live out our faith at home, at work, and in our community. You'll hear practical insights on discipleship and leadership, stories from real life, and simple steps to help you grow closer to Jesus and make a difference right where you are. Thanks for joining us. And now let's join the podcast with Living Out 180. We'd like to welcome you to the podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Terry, and I've got Pastor Brad Bryant here with us as we are Living Out 180, the name of the podcast, and it's connected to the church that we go to. Pastor Brad is the senior pastor, I guess. I don't know that you claim that title, but I call you senior pastor.
I appreciate that. The official title is teaching pastor.
Teaching pastor.
Which is really, really funny to have also.
All right.
Because, I don't know that I can teach anybody anything. I just enjoy trying.
Of 180 Church here in Maryville, Tennessee. And, if you want to find us, you can search that 180 Church, Maryville, Tennessee, and you'll find the church website. You'll find our YouTube channels if you go through YouTube, the Facebook page, the Instagram posts, all of the things.
All the things.
And I would encourage you to do so. We live stream the services every Sunday morning, and then those are there on YouTube. You can go back and watch. And if you really want to hear what happens on a Sunday morning, that's the way you should do it. That's not necessarily what this podcast is.
No. It's definitely different. And I'm not sure if I enjoy this more or that more.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy both of them.
It's
been fun.
I enjoy listening and being a part of the services on Sunday. I definitely enjoy talking though, so I like this a lot. Although I do occasionally interject something in the service, but it's always it's probably not always appropriate. But it's good. And the best thing about it, if you go to the YouTube channel, is that the worship team is there.
Yes, that's what I tell people.
They're amazing.
The worship is amazing. We've got a mediocre preacher and an incredible worship team, and somehow we survived to this point with those things.
I don't know if I'd say that, but I think the preaching is pretty spot on. But the worship team, like I said, if you can go check out their set on a Sunday morning. Regularly, it's exactly what I needed to get that Sunday morning started, and to get my head in the right place, because it's not always in the right place when I walk into service. I'd like to say it is, but it's not.
Right.
As I'm processing a lot of times the stuff either from the week before or processing where I'm going, and so the worship team though does a great job in just leading into the presence of God and getting my head in the right place to listen to the message that you're delivering. And so this is still a continuation of a series that we're currently in. Now, when these are put out, you may have to go back a little bit on the YouTube channel to find some of these messages. But this one is continuing the Radical Christian series that you're doing. And this one was called The Tree of Life. And so you went into this basic idea from Genesis, the story of the Garden of Eden and the trees that were in the Garden of Eden. So when you were kind of putting this together, looking at that tree of life versus tree of knowledge of good and evil, what were you trying to kind of get to, or what was being revealed, I guess, as you were putting this together?
For the particular message, it was really going back to this idea of the difference in having a relationship with Christ and knowing about Christ. It's not as much about more and more education. It's more about experience. And so the tree of knowledge of good and evil is really what it says. We know. Yeah. We know things. We see things. We can learn about things. We can teach other people about things. But the tree of life was different in that it was the entire life experience. And I've always said that for a Christian, we should have the best life. Not necessarily the most of anything, but we should have the best life. We should live and be full of life, and we should be the people that other people want to be around.
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea going into the message of where I wanted to go with that.
And, you know, I have thought myself as I've read this in Genesis of Adam and Eve and the choosing, you know, that Eve made this choice to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Adam made this choice as well. You know, there's all kinds of philosophies out there of what all went down in that. You can't tell me that he had been in the garden that long and didn't recognize that fruit whenever it came from Eve. Like, he knew exactly what was going on, whether he was actually there whenever this whole conversation was happening or whatever. But, you know, he knew. It wasn't like he was tricked into some kind of sin that he wasn't aware of. But a question I would have for God, you know, down the road is if they would have eaten from the tree of life, because there were two trees there they were told not to eat from. Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which, you know, started this whole cascade of sin. But I wonder what would have happened if they would, because when they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, all of a sudden sin entered the world, death enters the world. Then, so was the plan ever that humans were going to die? Were we just going to live in the Garden of Eden forever? I don't know.
I think that's an incredible topic to kind of stretch out and have the conversation.
Yeah, you know, because all these things enter with eating, like you said, shame and guilt, and, you know, all those things that we associate with sin. What would have happened if they had eaten from the tree of life? I don't know.
I don't either. I'm
interested.
And I think it goes back to this idea of just an all-knowing God that we can't wrap our heads around. I've always compared it to your children, like a toddler. You tell them not to do something, and you can just see in their eyes, you know what they're going to do.
Absolutely.
You're not controlling it, but you can see it. He really is going to pick that up. That's kind of, and I kind of compare that with the way God looks at us. That's the closest thing I have to it, of him being all-knowing, is he looks at us and literally knows what we're going to do next. But I do think that's a fascinating conversation.
Yeah. Well, and as we think about that choice that was made, it's really that we have those choices to make every day in our life. And I know in your message, you were talking about the difference between the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and you were then moving to the tree of life, being that tree of life is us making that choice to live in a relationship with Christ. But as you were thinking about this choice and kind of laying some of these scenarios out for everyone, how were you thinking about how this plays out in your life, this idea of the choices that we make every day, those leadership decisions, but not even necessarily saying these are leadership decisions, just I have to get up every day and make a choice, right? And I know you've spoken to everything from, you know, athletic teams about making choices to devotions. We used to do devotions all the time back in the day with elementary kids, middle school kids, high school kids. And this idea of choice is a constant discussion point. So when you're thinking about that in just the everyday life, the getting up every day, what was that part of kind of this message? But what were you thinking in that line?
It was part of the message, but it all comes back to the idea that I have, and I've not necessarily heard too many people talk about it, but the idea that my walk with Christ, while deeply personal, 100% my heart, you have no power. Nobody else has any power over my faith walk, and that I don't give them. So for me personally, my walk of faith is settled. I'm going to heaven. I'm following Jesus. And so everything else is driven from how do I share that with others. So I know that's a long introduction to an answer, but when you talk about how does this play out, you know, in my own life every day, I really think it's how I treat people. It's how I treat every interaction. And I try really, really hard to be very intentional with all my interactions for them to be positive. That's difficult, obviously, in certain days. You know, there are days where it's really easy to try to lift somebody else up because I feel like I'm already up.
Right.
And there's other days where I don't feel like lifting anybody up because I wish somebody would lift me up. And then you turn around and think about, once I do it, once I make somebody smile, once I feel like I have served somebody in a way that makes their day better, magically, no, not really. It's spiritually. I can feel my spirits begin to lift. So, again, long answer to the question is I just think it's how I treat and interact with other people, and all people.
Yeah.
And more so, really, with people that can't do anything for me, is how do I serve those people? From the, I've said this for years, from the person waiting on me at a restaurant, to the person scanning the groceries, to just people you see in a parking lot. How are they going to describe me if 30 seconds later somebody said, "Hey, did you see the guy in the red shirt? What do you think about that person?" I think that's important when it comes to our faith walk, because again, my faith is settled.
Right.
I don't know. I think we talked about this in the last episode, or maybe it was the one before. I'm going to heaven.
Right.
I don't know of anything that could happen today, and that's not a challenge. But I don't know of anything that could happen to make me turn my back on God. And so turning that towards other people, how do I get other people to that place? Because I like where I am faith-wise. I'm never satisfied in any other aspect of life. I always want to do more, be more, try to, accomplish more. But as far as my faith, I feel so good in where I am in my relationship with Christ, and I want other people to experience it.
Yeah. As I've interacted with my kids and have coached some teams and different things like that in sports, you get in competitive situations, and I try to get it into their head early on that there's only one thing that I can control when the event is taking place. Be that basketball, I've coached tennis and played tennis, played other sports, help with different aspects of other sports, and there's a lot of things that are outside of my control during that game. I can't help how good or bad the other team is. That's whatever they are is what they are. I've told my son the one thing you can count on in basketball is a bad call.
Yes.
That's going to happen. And that's really in any sport that has a referee, because humans make errors.
Human beings.
I didn't always get that when I was a teenager, but humans make errors.
I don't know that I got that last week, but
and,
anyway.
Right. And but the only thing really I can control in that moment is me and my emotions and the way I react to whatever's happening.
Yes.
I can control that. I can't control somebody else's reactions. I have to react sometimes to somebody else's actions, but all I can do in that moment is to control how I go about it, what I say, what I do in that moment. And sometimes I get that right, sometimes I don't. But it's that choice of I know who I am. I know who God is in me. We talked about the Spirit last podcast, the Holy Spirit, and there's fruit of those Spirit. I try to let that fruit show.
Yes.
But as an athlete, I've got to be able to control myself. If I can control myself, then I have a much better chance of winning that contest.
Yeah. We could do the rest of the podcast on how athletics compare to our walk with Christ, how it compares to leadership, how it compares to everything. That's why I think it's so important. But I had the same conversation with my kids, and I try to, and that's the thing, I try to live by it. You can control your attitude, you can control your effort. That's it.
That's it.
Nothing else is in your control. And when you respond to something that's out of your control, and you respond in a seemingly out of control manner, I don't know that there's a better definition of a crazy person.
Right.
I mean, so what you're telling me is something else is out of control, so you allow yourself to get out of control, and now nobody's in control.
Right. Everything's out of control.
And so I just think that you nailed it. Attitude and effort. I control me, and I think that goes to the, setting of the tone of this message. I can know a lot of stuff, but how is that working out in my life? Do I have life? And I've never been a huge rule follower, so I don't do well in those situations anyway.
Well, and part of this then goes to this idea of as we're making choices, it's what we can do, and it's also who we are. And so there's things that I can do, and there's things that God has equipped me to do. And it's also going back to that we've talked about of if Christ is in us,
right,
Now, am I still a human being? Absolutely. But if I've got Christ in me, and I'm a believer, then I've got a little bit something different there that I've got to go back to. And that's some of what you got into as you were comparing kind of this tree of knowledge of good and evil versus this tree of life. And you kind of went into the external versus the internal of, what I can control and what I can't control, how I react and how I should have reacted maybe at times. But it's really about that of if we get more of God, then that pursuit of getting more of God helps us then to hopefully reflect more of God to the world that we encounter, which is the ultimate thing that we're called to do, right? Is to reflect God. Because if we're reflecting God, then we're drawing people to Christ is the goal.
And that very, very, very old illustration of, we're like sponges, and, when somebody squeezes us, when the enemy squeezes us, when life squeezes us, what comes out is what's in us.
Yeah.
And we better make sure that you said it. That's what kind of triggered that in my mind is make sure there's enough of God in me that's what comes out when I'm under pressure, good or bad. Does those fruit of the Spirit, did those things come out of me, or do I allow something else to come out of me to say, I missed it there, I failed it there, and again, other people only see the external.
Yeah,
that's the part that's difficult. Kendall, you know who you are, you know what you want to do, you know who you want to be, but everybody else sees who they see.
Yeah.
And that makes it difficult sometimes, especially if they see you in a bad moment.
Right. Because like I said, I still get it wrong sometimes.
Yes.
I try to get it right more often than I get it wrong, but there are moments, like you said, in a bad moment, there are times that like I've not had as much sleep as I should have had. The whatever took place on the way to work, and I got in the wrong traffic jam, or and you catch me at that wrong moment, and your version of Christ in me is not great, but that's okay, because
that doesn't help.
That's
that
part of our
very
human
few
side.
people know how to drive. That doesn't help us at all.
So true. And then the area we live in just keeps getting busier, I feel like, and so the roads just keep getting more difficult to traverse at the speed and the time frame that I would like it to happen. If you kind of got onto a little bit of this of seeking to earn God's approval, as opposed to us living out like who God is in us. And I think that is so key to, I grew up a pastor's family. I grew up in the church. I mean, I was in the church as much as I was out of the church.
Right.
And it's easy to slip into, if I don't do X, then I have this guilt about not doing that. And instead of, because I'm like, well, God's going to be mad now because I didn't do this when I should have.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm trying to earn this.
It's exhausting.
Love of God. And I know you do a lot in your messages of talking about your kids and now your grandkids.
Yeah.
But that you even talked a little bit about that of like, is there something my kids are having to do to earn my love, or do I just give it to them?
Exactly.
And God is that ultimate father figure, right?
Yes,
that I get caught up in kind of earning God's love, and we've sat through messages where it's easy to slide into that. If you do this, God's going to do this, and there's very little of that in Scripture that's legit.
Right.
Like just to call that what it is.
Well, if you just pull it out by itself, you can find all kinds of
great.
If you look at them in context,
individual passages,
it doesn't work.
I love, I love the Scripture. Jeremiah, we've talked about that 29:11. People love that Scripture of God knows the plans He has for you, plans to prosper you, not harm you, plans to give you a hope in the future. And but they don't read all of Jeremiah.
Right.
When that comment was made,
wasn't a good time.
It was not a good time because he says, you're going to be in captivity. Buy a house, start a family. You're going to be here a while. Like that's what he says in essence. I mean, I modernized it with buy a house, but he says I think it says build a house.
He does say to plant a garden, build a house.
Plant a garden, build a house, start a family. And they're in the middle of captivity. They're not free. They're living in somebody else's country, and they're not being treated as equals. But we like to pick that one verse. But we live Christianity many times. It's easy for us to slip over into this approval, which in essence is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Like, I know to do this over here, so I should be doing it. I know that I'm supposed to read my Bible. I know I'm supposed to pray. I know I'm supposed to, live like this, treat this people, treat somebody this way. And then when we miss that mark, what happens? We slide into shame, guilt, doubt. And we act like all of a sudden God's mad at us and he's sitting up there now waiting to smack me on the back of the head when I walk by.
I just thought of a funny comparison. I don't know if my wife will ever listen to this, and if she does, this might be the last one she listens to.
Three in, and that was it.
But I thought of when we were younger, and I was still learning how to be married, and how to do things. And I can remember more than one time where I would ask in the middle of let's just call it what it was, in the middle of a fight, and I would just say, tell me what you want me to do, because I had failed somewhere. Tell me what you want me to do. And she would look at me like I was crazy. And I was like, what? Just tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. And her response was always, if you don't want to do it, it's not going to mean anything. And at that time, it's just throw your hands up and go sleep on the couch, whatever you had to do, which is funny. We never did that. We always, just would sleep on our sides of the bed and make sure we didn't touch each other. But again, you go back to our relationship with Christ. That's what God wants. He wants us to want to do it. And if that's not the internal motivation, then it falls into what you're just saying. We're just doing it because it's there. It's on the list.
It's the checklist.
It's the checklist.
And there's so much in life that I'm a very data-driven guy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Same.
I make a lot of decisions based on, what's the data say about why we should do this or why we shouldn't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those are external indicators, right? You're
Yes.
looking at either what has happened before, or you're looking at the trend line of where this is heading if we don't do something different, or which could be good or bad. But in our walk with Christ, we forget that relationships are not about the data.
Correct.
I don't have a checklist.
There's not a scoreboard.
Right. I don't have a checklist at the house. I don't have a scoreboard at the house. And it's a good thing, because I'd be down on that number probably from where my wife would be. She's pretty amazing. And I'm blessed beyond what I deserve, for sure. But we understand that. Well, some people understand that about marriage, about relationship. Of if I'm only doing this because I'm going to get brownie points with my wife, she sees through that,
and it's borderline manipulation.
Absolutely. And then I have to check myself to go, if she doesn't, if I'm trying to do something to get her to do this over here, then it. Like you said, that's manipulation, and that's one of those where if she's not on board with whatever we're talking about, that's not that shouldn't be on the table then.
Yep. And Paul took all that away when he said, "There's no scoreboard in love."
Yes,
keeps no record of wrongs.
And that's the same with our relationship with Christ. But we act like there's this scale, and so I've got to hit this level of Christianity then to get these blessings or whatever of God, and that's just simply not the relationship that Christ has put in place. It's not what Paul describes in the New Testament. It's not anything that is biblical to say I've got to do all these things to enter into heaven, to get to this level of whatever I think I'm in.
And that kind of takes us to the next point, where we really talked about external versus internal. And you put this down the heart of leadership. I try to have this conversation with lots of people who want to lead. The difference in a supervisor, manager, boss, and a leader is exactly that. A supervisor, manager, boss directs, motivates, whatever you want to call it, from an aspect of leverage. I'm going to leverage pay, I'm going to leverage time off, I'm going to leverage benefits, I'm going to leverage whatever to get you to do what I want you to do.
Yeah.
Whereas a leader not only does this, but should want to do this, is to lead from a place of relationship and engaging. And in other words, when you ask somebody that works for you, because supervisor, manager, boss, that's what we are in our day-to-day lives. but we want to be leaders within that role. And so within that role, when I ask somebody to do something, I don't want them to just do it because I'm the boss.
Yeah.
I want them, here I am, my wife may have taught me something and I didn't realize it. I want them to want to do that.
Yeah.
Because of our relationship and because they know if I'm going to ask them to do something, then it's important. It means something. It's not just manipulation.
Absolutely. Simon Sinek goes into some of this discussion with understanding the why, and if you can help, if somebody understands the why, then their buy-in is way more than the understanding the what. Well, if you do this, you get a pay, you get the time off, you get the benefits, you get whatever. But if they understand your why, and they understand your company's why,
yes,
you get a lot more people on board going in the same direction and have a desire to make that thing happen.
Have you ever seen, I love comedy, and that's one of my, I don't know if it's a weakness, but that's one of the things I do. I love to watch comedy, listen to comedy. And Michael Jr., who's a comedian, very good, very clean. He has a bit where he has a guy stand up and sing, and the whole lesson, and I can't remember the way he did it, but the whole lesson was, now tell me why you sing. And he tells him a story. He said, now I want you to sing the same thing you just did. And when he sings it after he tells him the why, there's so much passion and there's so much heart. And that's it.
Yeah.
Understanding the why. If you don't know why you do things, then it has become just, we've said it too many times, I guess, checking the box.
Yeah.
We're doing the checklist.
And that's what it goes back to. And it's all about that, what's the inward drive versus what's the outward kind of goal. And there's nothing wrong with the outward goal. I mean, I set goals in my own personal life. I look at what habits I need to have to accomplish those goals. Goals are great to live by, but there has to be an internal reason.
What are you becoming?
Behind that, absolutely. And hopefully, as you said, the difference of me being a boss as opposed to a leader is that hopefully whenever I get to where I'm going, there were people that chose to be on that pathway with me, that saw the reason why we were doing this. And they weren't doing it just because everybody's got to have a job, everybody's got to get a paycheck. And there's value to that.
They want to be on your team.
Yeah, but they actually want to be there with you.
I've been fortunate to, I don't know how to say this, but I've been fortunate to leave companies to go to something else. And one of the most satisfactory things that people say or that people have said, I'm sure there's some that behind my back said, thank goodness he's gone, but people that would say, this job was better because you were here. To me, that's the ultimate.
Right.
Am I adding that kind of value? Because, I don't want to be a placeholder no matter where I am. No matter what I'm doing, I don't want to be a placeholder. Let's add some value to it. Let's make it something special.
Well, as you were getting into this and we were comparing, in the message, this difference between, what we've just been talking about, that you get into kind of the three responses of if we're going to really live this life and grow and that sort of thing, what do we need to do? And you went into it with these three of fall in love with Jesus was the first.
Yeah.
Respond to sin with life, and then guard your heart from going back. And so you talk about that with fall in love with Jesus. You shared that Christ's love compels us, and that's the motivation. And so when you've been a pastor a good bit of your life,
yes,
and grown up in church your whole life,
yes,
what do you feel like that really looks like when somebody truly starts to fall in love with Christ? That's not necessarily a question on here. I just came up. It's kind of a question that we've got some notes on, but like you've seen this in church, that when people truly have this experience, and for me, the tough thing is, people get up with these, like I said, we've been in church a long time, and people will have these moments where they're like, at this point in my life, I knew, and I will tell you, I grew up in church. I grew up always kind of being in this culture of salvation and Christianity, and for me personally, I don't necessarily have that one story of, I was sitting there and this person was saying this and I felt God's call. Like, I don't have that.
Right.
I was just there. I was in that moment. I have experiences.
I used to wonder if
about.
I was saved because I didn't have that weight that everybody else seems to have.
But you've also been able to see people that truly were living life away from Christ and then have this encounter with Christ. Is when I'm describing that, what does that look like? What have you seen that look like as you've interacted with people?
Honestly, I think in my own life, the moment there's not a date, there's not a thing. It's a season, and that in my season of life of failure, following that season was when I really began to see it in my own life, and it wasn't birthed out of desire, because the desire was opposite. I really didn't want anything to do. It's weird because I failed, and for some reason I was mad at God. I'm still not sure how I reconciled that in my brain looking back at it. But coming through that and on the other side of that failure, this sincere desire to be closer to Christ. That was the thing for me, and for me, that falling in love with Jesus, that's what it is. It's the desire to be closer to Christ, which to me means being more like Him. The silly, and it wasn't silly, but looking back on it now, it kind of seems that way. The WWJD, what would Jesus do? But what would our lives look like if we did live that way?
Yeah.
In a lot of our interactions, what would that look like? I know that when people ridicule or speak out against me or say things that are bad about me, what I want to do is use my God-given gift of speech and wear them out. With just the most cutting remark, or the most eloquent way of quote unquote putting them in their place. But so if I look at what Jesus did, the most difficult scripture to live out, He opened not His mouth.
Yeah.
Well, dang it.
Right.
So you want me to be like Christ? That changes my life a little bit.
Yeah.
But to me, that is that falling in love with Jesus. And as we get closer to Him, that's where that came from on being compelled, being drawn. Just that's the idea, just being drawn. And so I want to turn it around. Yeah. So what does that look like for you? What does falling in love with Jesus look like for you?
Well, so I've been in
we're at a disadvantage because we've been in church all our life, and this is just normal conversation.
And it is. And I'll tell you, I'm always super cautious whenever I see someone, and this isn't. I'm not saying that I'm like. I don't want to say not judging somebody, but I'm caution is probably the only word I know to use there. And I've done youth ministry for a while. I've been in church. I've seen stuff. When someone has an encounter with Christ, they can truly have like this moment of huge life-changing events take place.
Yeah.
And I've seen kids as well that they say because of this conference I went to, because of this camp, because of this, I'm going to change my whole life. And I think that they don't understand the ramifications of that statement. And that is a statement of outward anticipation of like, I'm just going to live better.
Yeah.
And the problem there is if there's no discipleship, if there's no true falling in love with Christ that takes place, then more than likely whatever decisions they've made and choices they've made aren't going to stick, and they're going to be right back in the same situations that they were in, if not even worse. And so the thing that I go back to is watching people have these experiences where they start to truly get into the deep conversation, which, like I said, it's discipleship at that point. But and it's finding the right people. That's why I believe in small groups and believe in people. You got to associate with the right people. So that you can have those deep conversations, because it's easy for me to go, this is obviously not right, so I need to change that. but what does that look like every day living it out? So when I was in high school, right at the end of high school, junior, senior year of high school, going
Just a few
into
days
early
ago.
years
Just
of
a few
college,
years
right? I really was, and probably maturity, trying to figure out, like, what is this thing of living life as a Christian really
Right.
about? Like,
Right.
you know, okay, teenage years and all the things, but I'm looking at, like, what do I want to go do? What do I want to be? Where do I want to go to college? All this stuff. And I was really starting to get into just personal devotion time. Not because somebody had told me to, not because my parents, obviously they always supported that kind of thing, but I was just really getting into, like, reading the Bible more, trying to worship more, trying to spend time in prayer more. And I remember through that process of God really convicting me over the music that I had in my truck.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, you know, there's only a handful of times that I could say I really felt like God spoke to me and said like this. One was when I met my wife, but I remember like this just overwhelming feeling of, well, what about this music that you listen to in your train? I'm like, it's music, like it's, you know, it's modern stuff, it's whatever.
Right.
And I joke with a person I work with of like, I was a big gangster rap person in the 90s. I didn't look like a gangster rap person, but I listened to a lot of it. You know, and we'll still reminisce those days some and have a lot of laughs. But I was like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, okay, some of the things that you're talking about struggling with, some of the things you're praying about, some of the things you want to really change in your life, go out there and listen to the stuff that you're putting into your head driving down the road. That's just background noise. You're not even paying attention to it. And I started really listening to some of the stuff, and I ended up throwing out like this whole stack of CDs. That tells you how long ago it was. It was this whole stack of CDs that I threw away. And it was it wasn't my parents were saying, making me throw these away. It wasn't that's good. Somebody was saying, you've got to do this. It was an internal thing. And if you talk about what does it look like to fall in love with Christ,
not the checklist.
It wasn't the checklist. It was the God, I want to do this because you've revealed this to me that maybe I don't need to be letting some of this junk. Now, here's the thing. That doesn't mean that you need to go throw away all of your music. That doesn't mean that somebody listening to this doesn't need to go through it. That was a personal thing of I had to do that to get in to in that moment feel like to go deeper with Christ. I had to do that. It was shortly after that I felt like God had changed my pathway, because I was a college student at a local university and everything was great. I just done this summer job where I got paid to show people around the university all this. And it was a little bit, this was a process of several years, but there was a point there that what was going on is God was actually setting me up to hear the plan of what I needed to really do to start my adult journey. And in that moment, I started to actually really what I would say hear from God of starting to understand that voice, starting to understand when he was speaking to me to say, this is the path you need to go in. Here's what you need to do. And I remember I was sitting in my room and, kind of spending time in prayer, and I really felt like God was calling me to switch universities, which I know somebody out there listening to this and be like, I don't know if God is interested in that sort of thing. I believe he was. And he was calling me, and I was like, I don't know. We're talking about 2-3 weeks from the start of the fall semester.
Right.
I was already a year in, I had registered, financial aid set up, like all that stuff. And I was like, okay, God, maybe, and I came across the verse in Matthew where it says, if I take care of the lilies in the valley, if I take care of the sparrows, why would you worry about this? You think I'm not going to take care of you? And I was like, okay. So the next day I called the university I felt like God was telling me I needed to transfer to. I'd never been on a visit. I hadn't been to that university since I was small. I called the admissions office and I'm like, if we need to do this for the spring semester, and they were like, well, if you can send us your stuff, we'll look at it. We might go. I sent them stuff. I got a call back and they were like, if you want to come this fall semester, we can make all this stuff happen. That was a fun conversation with my parents because I was moving now several hours away because I was living at home going to the university close to the house. And my dad, when I talked to him about it, and I think it's probably because during that time they also saw what was going on in my life. And I sat down and said, guys, I feel like this is what I need to do. This is where I need to go. And Mom and Dad never batted an eye. Now, in private, I don't know how they handled it. And I know that my dad did not handle me moving out well.
I'm sure that you could compare with some conversations
absolutely.
you and your wife have had.
Yeah, with my kids now
decisions.
that they're in that age.
Yes.
But it really was that moment of like I said, it's that deeper love of God. And that's what I look for whenever I hear people talking about they're making a decision for Christ, they're making changes in their life. And it's not I'm going to do, let me show all of these drastic changes I'm doing to show how much I'm doing in my life. It's are they really digging to get deeper into this relationship with Christ?
Right.
And it's about then not what I have to do, but what I want to do.
Yes. It goes back, I mean, and I know we need to go to the next one, but just when I think about falling in love, there's not a formula, I don't think, but is there? I mean, spending time, intimate conversation, all of those things. Are we doing those things in prayer, reading our Bible, allowing God's Word to direct our lives? All of these things, I believe there are some things that we can do to assist that. But I do think, people talk about falling in love like falling in a ditch. They don't know where it came from. But that's not
the head.
Yeah, but that's never been the case.
No.
There's always some intentional actions on our part, and I think that's one of the things we have to do with Christ, just like you talked about.
It's moving from have to get to.
Yes.
If I'm approaching this as I have to do X, it's probably not. That's probably not from a heart of love. Then.
Nope. Nope.
I get to do a lot of really cool things is from a heart of love.
Right.
And then you get into this responding to sin with life. This is one of those. I think I really think I don't get into the spiritual weeds too often, but it's one of those of I do believe that Satan attacks us through ways that are not always as clear as what people act like. Well, you'll see this big thing. It's obviously sin. If you noted that it's that bad or that's going to destroy your life, very few people would do it, right? But you said that Jesus came to set us free, not to make us sorry. That statement is such an awesome statement to think about, because many times that's what we live our life like. Oh God, I'm sorry. I messed up again. I'm sorry. I can't believe I did that again. I'm sorry. And this relationship with Christ, that's not why he didn't come and die and raise again and give us this ability to experience life. I mean, how many times does he describe it as life, right? For us then to walk around feeling sorry all the time.
Right.
And I think that's one of the ways the enemy attacks Christians is to continue to try to show them that they don't measure up, right? I mean, that goes back to what the law is. You don't measure up. You can't be holy. You can't be righteous on your own.
I just thought of something, and the difference in repentance and being sorry. That's a big difference. Repentance is not being sorry; it's turning away and going a different direction. But when I think of the difference, when I think of this, set us free, not make us sorry, I think about if we take that back to a leadership perspective, high expectations yet high grace.
That's good.
I love basketball. I love Rick Barnes' style, the coach at Tennessee, and I remember him at news conferences, post game, whatever, and he's talking about whoever his best player is at the time, and he talks about I want him to shoot more. I want him to shoot more, and we're watching the game going, they're not good.
Right. Please don't shoot another shot.
I don't think he should shoot anymore. And Rick Barnes is like, I want him to shoot until I tell him to stop shooting. And the only way I tell him to stop shooting is by taking him out of the game. And he starts talking about taking smart shots and all this stuff. But when I think about that, I think of the expectation is I want you to shoot a lot because I expect you to make them.
Yeah.
But if you don't, there's still high grace. And I think of that in my relationship with my kids, and I don't know that I was this person. I wanted to be. And I want my sons to be this. I want my son and my son-in-law to be this for their children. And Chris Hodges, Church of the Highlands, said this one time, and it's always stuck with me since I heard it 10 years ago. And he said, I want to be the type of father that when my kids mess up gloriously, that their response is, I need to call my dad. Not, I hope my dad doesn't find out. And that's what I think about when I think of responding to sin with life, is this high expectation, high grace. There's a high bar in the family. There's a high bar in the relationship. There's a high bar in all of this, but there's also a lot of grace. Try hard. Shoot high. And if you miss, call me.
Yeah.
We're going to make it through together.
Wow. That is awesome. That's an awesome thought to have as a dad, but also just in leadership roles of giving that space for the people that are under you to shoot big shots.
Yes. Try something.
And whenever they miss it, they don't look over at the judgment of you missed it, but they look over at that keep shooting. You got it. The next one is going to go in. The next one is going to hit the mark. The next one, you're going to land this next one. Because if you don't, what you do, if you don't provide that, then you're not providing an opportunity for people to fail. And if you're not providing an opportunity for people to fail, then you're not providing an opportunity for people to learn.
And thinking about, just take that failure. In failure, who do we remember more in failure? The people that sold us out, walked away, whatever, or the people that showed us grace and said, hey, come on, let's do this again. Let's try again. I'm still here. I've not left you. Those are the things I think about. Respond to sin with life.
Yeah.
There's plenty of darkness in the world. Turn on, Pastor Ronnie says all the time, turn on a light.
Right.
Turn on a light. And I think that's what I think about when I think of the difference between sin and life.
Absolutely. The last point you made was guard your heart from going back. In leadership and discipleship, what are some of the ways that we can guard against that slipping back into old patterns? That old patterns are so hard to break, and that default of, well, here we go again. That's a tough thing to get out of your head, whenever life starts throwing you some curveballs and you're like, well, here we go again. And it's easy to jump on that train of, well, God's punishing me because I didn't do X, Y, and Z. Right. Or I need to tithe more now, or I need to go to church more, I need to read more. And not that any of those things wouldn't be a bad thing to do. You could do those things and just in response to, living a better walk with Christ. But trying to keep us from slipping into that default mode, trying to keep us from slipping into those old patterns of bad mistakes. So how do we guard our heart from doing that?
I think it's daily choices. That's me when I think about that. I think it's daily choices. I think it's surrounding myself with people that will hold me accountable. If I'm guarding my heart from coming back, from going back, I just think of putting safeguards in place. And for me, that's people that I have given permission. I'm close enough to say, hey, back off a little bit. I saw what you said. There was a thing where somebody said, hey, I saw, it wasn't to me, it was in a group. It said, hey, I saw the way you said this to your wife, and it was a little harsh. Did you think about that? And the man said, no, I didn't think about it at all. And so I watched them in a small group just go back and forth with the conversation, and the person that had said it, man, I didn't think about that. And he left the group. He went into another room, and I'm assuming he called his wife and apologized. But that's that daily choice, because we all know that we don't, again, just like falling in love, we don't get into sin by waking up one day and say, hey, I think I'm going to fail today. Hey, I think I'm going to sin today.
Right.
We wake up and we make a dumb decision that takes us closer to that edge. And then we go farther and farther and farther until we don't even know where the line is anymore. And so for me, I think it's, daily choices. What about for you?
I think that's where it gets into the importance of accountability. You mentioned that. And when I thought about accountability, it's who am I putting in my life for that accountability? And that's I look at that in a lot of arenas, but I look at that in my spiritual walk. Are there people that can come up to me and say, hey, I saw you on that one. You need to think about that. You probably missed it. And it's not something that then I need to bow up and get in a fight of, but I can respect those individuals enough to go, let's have a conversation about this. Let's
After
talk
I get
about it.
mad.
After I get mad, and then I'm going to
Because
get over it.
somebody told me I was wrong.
But just recently, my wife and I, started getting a group back together at our house, and naturally, I'm not going to give a bunch of personal information on that, but
Sure.
it was just wild as we were sitting in the room talking to the people that were there, and hearing life in each other's context of what's going on. And my wife and I, as we were talking to this, it's a couples group, and it was we want to provide a space for couples to just be able to come together and live life. And you never know who God is going to put there. I had thrown some names at you of, I think I'm going to invite these people. Some of those people showed up, some didn't, and the ones that did, as we're sitting here talking about what's going on in your life right now, not necessarily in that, like, it wasn't in that, I don't know, like, super spiritual moment of, like, I'm going to pray for you right now.
Right.
But it was like, hey, if we're actually going to do this thing, if we're going to really spend time together, live life, like, we have to be honest, we have to be transparent in this moment, we have to be able to talk about the things that are really going on. Going around the group, I mean, it was just wild. People would start off with, well, I don't really have anything, but, and then it was like all of a sudden 10 minutes later had gone by, of all of this stuff.
Deep.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, I mean, this is the first meeting, and we already are in pretty deep with some of this. But it's because humans, I think, we need that. And when you're given that safe environment to say, like, I really want to join with you and help you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm going to hold you accountable to what you're saying and where you're wanting to go with God. And I might point out a flaw to help you see it.
Right.
And it's in that mindset of love. And so how do we guard each other of saying, hey, we've made some progress here, let's not go back, is putting some of those people around you that are going to be behind you, that when you try to go back, they're standing there going, nope. You ain't going that way. We can go a different way, but it's not that way. That can speak truth in those moments, that can then hold you accountable, that don't mind pulling you aside and being like, dude, you need to think about this because you're missing it. And that's how we guard ourselves. I think we were meant to live this thing with others. That's why I think Christ had disciples. If we were meant to do it on our own, we would just have some really good stories of Christ going around and doing this thing. He didn't even do ministry on his own, though. Yeah. There was multiple times where the ministry he was doing was assisted by the disciples doing what they needed to do in that moment. God performed a miracle, but it was because the disciples had gone out and found the loaves of bread and the fish.
Right.
And then God multiplied it and made this amazing thing. And then the disciples collected it all afterward. Like there was work to be done, but it was in a group, and it wasn't in this solitary lifestyle of we can make this path on our own. And really, when you read the New Testament, the New Testament, what we call the church today, was small groups of people, where people living life together in homes, and it's grown into what we call church today. But sometimes we got to push back to that, I think, to homes and get real with people again. And I'm not doing this to check a number for the church. I'm not doing this to add a box over here. I'm not doing this to the church can brag about how many people they've got into a group. I'm doing this because I need it, and I think there's also some other people that I know that need just somebody else that they know is living life and is going to mess up, and we're all going to be here together, and I got your back. And I might say, hey, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, but I got your back. And those are the people in the past when we've done this. Those are the people that showed up whenever something was going on at the hospital. Those are the people that showed up whenever I needed to move. Those are, one guy jokingly told me, he said, hey, I don't mind to help you move and do whatever you need to do, but if you want me to move that piano again, it's going to cost more than a slice of pizza and a Pepsi. Yes. And it was so true, because I hate moving that piano. It's a heavy thing. Right. But those are the people that live life with me, that know who I truly am, that know I make mistakes, that we laugh about the life experiences that we've had together, and realize that we're all in this together, and we're in different places, we're in different journeys, but we're going to make it together.
Yeah. You can almost sum up, today, we started off just talking about tree of life, tree of knowledge of good and evil, and all these different things. But I think it all came back to it's really about people. It's always about people.
Yeah.
I believe God put millions of us, billions of us on the planet because He wanted us to find a way to have some kind of community with some of them.
Yeah.
And I think our lives are usually better and richer because of it.
Absolutely.
I know that the more people that are around me, the more I pay attention to how I act. And there may be something, there may be something to that. Okay, Lord, all right, I see you.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion. At least I've enjoyed it. I don't know if anybody has made it this far in the podcast as we put these out for people to listen, but for me, it goes back to what you talked about of leading from a place of grace.
Yes.
I hope I do that in leadership, but I have to remind myself to do that in my walk with Christ. Of one of the really cool things that He provided was grace. Because man, I should get a lot of things that I'm not getting right now.
And when I remember how much grace it takes for me on a daily basis, it makes me want to give more.
Yeah.
It definitely makes me want to give more.
Jokingly, you mentioned Pastor Ronnie. He when I think about grace and that sort of thing, he said he always prayed for crop failure on some things because he sowed some things that he didn't want to reap. And I know that I have in my life say, God, I need a little bit of crop failure out there. That's grace. To say I don't need to always get what I deserve because I messed up on a couple of things. But God provides an amazing amount of grace to cover those things and to provide a way then for us to live in a relationship with Him.
Completely out of love.
That's awesome.
Completely out of love.
Well, I think that sums it up. Thank you.
That's it.
Thanks for joining us on Living Out 180. If today's conversation encouraged you, share it with someone and subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to find out more about our church, you can find us on the website 180churchtn.com. We'll see you next week as we keep living out 180 together.